specifically kept it to a small venue because Marianne Williamson is going to speak directly to you and tell you what's up. I'm Laura Butterworth. I am an ambassador at large. And I am a volunteer. I've been traveling the United States, and my volunteer job is to get every venue ready for Marianne Williamson so she can speak and so everyone knows in that town that she is arriving and that she is ready. I have traveled from Maine to New Hampshire and south along the New England border, all the way to South Carolina. I've spent a week in Alabama collecting signatures to get Alabama on the ballot. That's my goal. And then I've traveled to Los Angeles and also to Ojai, where we had standing ovations, which were so eloquent that I was unable to introduce Marianne. I only just said, no introduction needed. I first heard about Marianne Williamson in 1989. I had just graduated from college, and we had a crisis in our midst. The AIDS epidemic had just arrived, and like COVID, we really didn't know how we could catch AIDS. We were concerned that we could get it from kissing our loved ones. We thought we could get it from swimming pools, and indeed, we could. Marianne Williamson went to the epicenter. She went to Los Angeles, and she opened Project Angel Food. Project Angel Food was an effort, a nonprofit effort, which fed those patients who had AIDS, who were homebound. At the time, many family members didn't even know that their loved ones were gay, much less that they had a life-threatening illness. For almost 40 years or plus, she can tell you, Marianne Williamson has been an advocate and one of the greatest teachers in the United States. 40 years. Activism. I met Marianne Williamson almost a year ago. I was in Concord, New Hampshire, and I heard her speak about Citizens United. I didn't know the impact of Citizens United on our government. Citizens United is a loophole that allows corporate donors to influence our politicians. When I heard this, I thought, I need to support this woman. And indeed, I'm going to take some time off my work and spend whatever it will take to make sure America knows that a teacher is in their midst. Yesterday, I set out and I met Carl at the Roosevelt. It's called the Roosevelt Library. It was the first library in the country, first presidential library in the country in Hyde Park. And I saw evidence of what Roosevelt had done with the CCC. The CCC was the Civilian Conservation Corps. This is something that Marianne is proposing with her New Deal. If we put Americans back to work, we can combat climate change. We can combat poverty. I've just written a Substack called Laura Butterworth for Marianne Williamson, and I talk about what I have seen on the road in these last 8 months. I have seen poverty. I have seen homelessness. And yet these are things, if we go by the issues that Marianne Williamson has put on her page, we can change the way the United States functions. So today, I know you're excited about hearing her speak, and I'm excited to introduce Marianne Williamson, who is still running for President of the United States.
It is. Okay. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Carl. And I just want to say something about having Stanley Jordan here with us. I hope all of us are like registering. This is one of those moments in your life that you have to be in a small room and you have to just hear Stanley Jordan play.
Oh, I know.
Anyway, Stanley, it has meant so much to me that someone of your talent, of your fame, of the power that gives you, that you would stand for my candidacy, so many people. And that's really part of where America is right now, actually. So many people really support you, Marianne. I really don't want to say it because, people say blah, blah, blah. And you're just out there with what you believe, and I can't tell you how much it has meant to me. And not only your support, but your friendship. Thank you so much. Adorable, and I'm so glad that we're able to have the conversation that we are able to have tonight. I was speaking to somebody the other day who was telling me that he had just read a book where the author used the word, sort of made up the word, K-word. Out of chaos comes order. The idea that we are in chaotic times. So I'd like to talk to you tonight about what that means to me and what I think makes up a very relevant conversation for all of us right now. One thing none of us fail to realize is the chaos of this moment. It's been interesting for me as I travel around the country. No one doesn't get what's happening. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's in denial. A lot of people are saying, well, Americans are apathetic. I don't think Americans are apathetic. I think people just can't even believe we're here. People are just kind of, what's going on? And it's a little bit of a problem because Americans are very good with a to-do list. If there's a problem, just tell us what we need to do. But this is not a moment that lends itself to a to-do list. It's a moment where we have to really reflect. It's as much a to-be list as it is a to-do list. And wisdom has to marinate. And we're living in a time of what is in many ways a kind of all systems breakdown. And it calls us to find and to actualize an all systems response. Not only in terms of all the systems within our society, but all the systems within ourselves. You know, the 20th century mindset was different than the 19th century, and the 21st century mindset is different than the 20th. The 20th century mindset was very mechanistic. It was a product of Newtonian physics. It saw the world as a big machine. And if you have a problem with anything going on in the world, you just tweak the machine. That had many positive results. It gave birth to industrialization, it gave birth to Western science, Western medicine, many good things came from it. But it also led to an imbalance in the Western mind, where we became so mesmerized with what was going on outside that in many ways some of our more internal powers withered away. Now, around the turn of the century, there was a British physicist who said that it turns out that the world is not a big machine, it's one big thought. And that means, of course, that we've now entered a century which is not so mechanistic, in which it is recognized that there's more going on than what's happening on the realm of the symptom. And that we must take an integrative approach to repair, just like with medicine. We now have an integrative model of medicine. It's the body and the mind and the spirit. And we must develop an integrative model of politics, where we are bringing to the process all of who we are in order to be able to discern, much less know how to do what it is we need to do. I also want to point out about Gen Z. They're not 20th century people.
Right.
Gen Z were not even born there. If they were even born there, it was just like to learn to walk. So they do not have, there's not the natural temperamental propensity to just look at what's happening on the outside. And also, I think that it's understandable why Gen Z would say, why should I have to live my life at the effect of bad ideas, particularly bad economic ideas that came from the 20th century? I agree with you, by the way. So we are called to a moment where we are, whether we wish to or not, unless we are in complete denial, recognizing a fundamental breakdown. Now, we are living at a time of two parallel phenomena. One world is falling apart in front of our eyes in ways that we almost can't believe. But it's also true that a new world is struggling to be born. And I think we're called to cater to both. We're called to be both death doulas and birth doulas. We're called to help the world that needs to fall away responsibly and wisely. You know, sometimes in life it's not up to you what you learn, only whether you learn through joy or through pain. The world is going to change now. There's too much underlying tension. There's too much underlying stress. Change is coming. The issue is when it blows, what direction is it going to blow? Now, it can blow, and this is where the chaotic issue comes in. This chaos can turn to order, but only if we are very mature and very responsible right now. And one of the things we have to do is come out of our silos in order to face this moment. So we can have a new birth of freedom, as Abraham Lincoln would say. This can be a chaos that turns into order of a higher level of sustainability and freedom and the actualization of the principles on which we stand, on which we purport to stand. And I think that in a sober analysis of this moment, we recognize that if it does not flow in the direction of greater freedom and greater possibility, it is reasonable to assume it will fall in the direction of chaos, violence, dystopia, and possibly authoritarianism, the likes of which we've never seen in this country. So we're living in a moment where we as a generation are called to a profound sense of responsibility. And when I say as a generation, I said a couple of minutes ago, we need to come out of our silos. We've all become so aware, who's black, who's white, who's brown, who's Jewish, who's Christian, who's Muslim, who's gay, who's straight, who's non-binary, who's this, who's that, and now we've even had that with age. So when I say generation, I don't mean are you boomer, are you X, are you Z, are you, at a certain point, and on the generational thing, I don't care if you are 18 or 80, I'm talking to you. Because you're the adults now. I don't care if you're black, Jewish, gay, whatever, it's a hyphen and then the word American. We need to have an American conversation right now. And that is not in any way to minimize the importance of work we have to do on those individual identities, but I'm reminded of a phrase in alchemy called separatio. And separatio is the idea that the individual elements are separated out in order to be perfected so that they can then join at a higher level. You don't want to forget that part. The first principle here in the United States is out of many, one. E pluribus unum. We are many. That's part of the freedom. Nobody has a monopoly on truth. Everybody gets to be what they want, theoretically. All of that. But we're united by common first principles. And it's in finding that space of what we have in common, which not only is the rights that we are to be afforded here, but also the responsibility that this moment, and that simply being an adult American presents to us, that I believe that we find our deepest possibility for conversation and ultimately action. Now, in order to enter into that space, let's talk about what that space is. That space has to do with recognizing America's mission statement, the Declaration of Independence. Now, Abraham Lincoln said the Declaration of Independence is an eternal rebuke against all forms of tyranny and oppression. That's why he saw it as the moral basis for the Civil War. It is our mission statement, it is our North Star. But John Adams, our second president, said that he hoped we would visit our first principles every July 4th. If the principles of the Declaration of Independence are inscribed on a marble wall somewhere, or written on parchment, right, underneath glass in Washington, we send our kids when they're in the 8th grade to go see them, that's not enough. It's said in the Jewish religion that every generation must rediscover God for itself. And every generation has to rediscover the meaning of the Declaration of Independence in our time, for ourselves. Those words have to be inscribed not just on marble walls or on parchment, they have to be inscribed on our hearts in our time. And if they're not, they lose their moral force. They lose their life force. They become abstractions. They don't have the electricity, they don't have the chi. And what happens in that case is that we become easy to play. And that is what has happened. We have been played. Now, most people know something's kind of wrong. Something's wrong on some deep level. So we have to think this through. Werner Erhard said, you can live your life one of two ways. You can either live your life out of circumstances, or you can live your life out of a vision. Right now, we are so inundated by stressful and stress-producing circumstances, that we're always playing whack-a-mole. There's a problem here, there's a problem there. We're living in a state of permanent crisis. It's an environmental crisis, it's an economic crisis, it's a housing crisis, it's a disease problem. There's always a crisis, right? So we all know that something is wrong, and we also know that we have to have a vision that we can agree on about the country as it should be. But right now, I'm reminded of Einstein's line that we all know, that we can't solve the problems of the world from the level of thinking that we were at when we created them. So we're going to have to do some deeper thinking. And one of the things that I will talk to you about tonight is that the political system, as it now exists in the United States, is not a conduit for deeper thinking. It is a conduit for shallow thinking. And there's a reason for that. You could take any two people in this room who do not know one another, and you go have dinner later tonight, and I would be willing to guess that within 30 minutes you know which of you is in therapy, which of you has had toxic relationships, which of you needs more self-care, which of you has had trauma you're dealing with, and which of you needs to set boundaries. What that means is you've all been schooled in deeply analyzing yourself. But when it comes to collectively analyzing what's happening to us, collectively, we have been trained to keep it shallow. We have been trained to think like sixth graders. And we have been trained to basically farm out our best thinking. We've been trained to just allow some political class. Surely those people know what they're doing, even though at this point it is so clearly that what they're doing could kill us all. So, what is the level of thinking that we need to participate, with which we need to participate in order to go deep enough, in order to get to some deeper truths that perhaps the political establishment not only does not foster, but in many ways we choose to resist? Well, what do you do in your own individual life? You get to a certain age, you know you're individuating, you might go to therapy. You might participate in some situation where it's time to find out where you came from. You start asking your parents the history of your family, the history of your people, your race, your religion, your family. You begin to realize that if you go back in time and know where you came from, then you can have a clearer sense of where you are now. You begin to understand, what do I owe my ancestors and what do I owe to my descendants? Where are the things that I got from my ancestors that I want to take in and even inhabit at a deeper level, stand on their shoulders, pass it on to my children even better? And then, what were the things I might have gotten from my family or from my people, and I go, you know what, that one needs to stop here with me. I'm not passing that one on. So I'm asking you to do that with me tonight. Our history as Americans. Okay? Let's go to the beginning. 1776. In 1776, some very brave men, 56 of them, came together and signed the Declaration of Independence, America's mission statement, the principles on which we would purport to stand. Now, I say that they were very brave because if the British had won the war, they all would have been executed as traitors against the King of England. With their signatures, with the founding of this country, with the signing of that document, a portal of possibility, feel free, man, to come on at this chair's over here. A portal of possibility was opened up, not just for people in this country, although we certainly will talk about the fact that it didn't mean all people, not only for people in this country, but for people in the world. That document was a radical repudiation of institutional systems of injustice. It was radical in 1776, and it is radical today. 4 major principles which every generation should revisit. Number 1, all men are created equal. That was an incredibly powerful repudiation of centuries of social and political and economic orders in which it was outrageous to think that there shouldn't be just one class of people, the landed gentry in that case, who were considered entitled. Entitled to the land, entitled to the wealth, entitled to opportunity to create more wealth, and so forth. Here is posited all men created equal. Radical then, radical now. Number two, all men endowed by their creator, divine right here, to the inalienable rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. We call that today self-actualization. We call that today, go for it. Do it, be what you want to be, do what you want to do, fly as high, go here, go there, do what you want to do, up to you, whatever makes you happy, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. Radical. Radical then, radical now. I mean, you can look at something like transgender Americans. In both those principles, we're still dealing with it today. That's what these arguments are. You see it within that context. Number three, because it just gets more radical. Number three, governments are instituted to secure those rights. Not chip away at those rights, not diminish those rights, not limit those rights. Secure those rights. And number four, if the government is not doing its job, we the people have the right to alter it or to abolish it. Radical then, radical now. Now that's where this whole thing got started, in the space of human possibility. It's a spiritual statement, it's a moral statement, as well as a political statement, a human possibility that had never been posited on this planet before. That's where the American story began, but that's also, of course, the moment in which it was so obviously gnarly. Because out of the 56 signers, 41 of them were slave owners. Now that's extremely important. That's the American story. That both and. That dichotomy. It was with us at the beginning. It's our national DNA. It's baked into the cake. And that struggle, that intersection of the best that humanity has to offer and the worst that humanity has to offer has been on display in every generation since. And not only is every generation playing out that story and an iteration of that story, some have to play it out more dramatically than others. And everything we're going through right now is no different. It's just the latest iteration of the same story. So you look at your history and you go, well, how did other generations handle it? How did this play out? And you realize that it actually played out very impressively. Number one, yes, we had slavery, but a generation rose up with abolition, with the Civil War, the constitutional amendments to abolish the institution of slavery. Yes, we had institutional suppression of women, but a generation rose up with the women's suffrage movement and with the passage of the 19th Amendment. Yes, we had the first Gilded Age with the inherent economic injustices. A generation rose up with the establishment of organized labor. We had institutionalized suppression of black people in the American South in the form of segregation. A generation rose up with the Civil Rights Movement, desegregation, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, and so forth. I've been running for president for the last year because it's our turn now. Let's be very clear, I'm not delusional. I understand that Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee. So you might ask, why are we here then? And I'll tell you why we're here. Because if I've learned anything, it's that here is the horse race, and here's what's happening in this country. And they're not necessarily the same thing. And the horse race has to do with the political media industrial complex and how it works. It's a system that is itself a big business, which is itself part of the corporate matrix that we're going to be talking about here tonight. And I'll say some things about that, but the main point is they have their conversation, and because they are themselves a corporate power, they are very adamant about what conversation is allowed within the context of what they consider should be your choices and your politics. What I have come to realize on a visceral level, having spent the last year in the belly of that beast, is that there's a conversation you and I need to be having. And you and I need to be having this conversation regardless of what happens within the horse race. So when they say they won the horse race, that's their way of saying in this very paternalistic way to all of us, like we're children, you go home now.
Yeah.
You go home. You have your little performative theater thing called primary. Right? So you go home now. No more conversation about any of that. I'm just not that kind of woman. I'm just not that kind of woman. So the conversation is what matters. And as I said to you before, when Werner Erhard said you can live your life out of circumstances or you can live your life out of a vision, we know what the circumstances are. But the kind of thinking that we need to practice right now is not one in which we allow ourselves to simply give up because of circumstances. Obviously, what would the abolitionists have done if they thought, well, it's all locked up? They unlocked it. What would women suffragists have said? Well, nothing we can do, it's all locked up. They unlocked it. What about the early labor organizers in the face of the incredible injustices of the Gilded Age? Well, it's all locked up. They unlocked it. What did the civil rights movement say? They unlocked it. And I'd also like to point out, being in the chapel here, that one of the things that I think the American left particularly, there's a blind spot there. There's a materialistic and materially based analysis of American politics, which had more to do with the Bolshevik Revolution than it had to do with the American Revolution. Because, and that's not, I mean, I'm not saying that there's not some meaning in that conversation, because in terms of class analysis, in terms of economic analysis, I think there is actually some relevance. But that does not speak to what has happened here in this country. In this country, most social justice movements arose from religious and spiritual centers. Among the abolitionists, there was the white abolitionists and the black abolitionists. Among white abolitionists, most of that conversation emerged from the early evangelical churches in New Hampshire. Among the women who were the leaders of the women's suffragist movement, most of them were religious Quakers. That's where they got their belief, well, we should all be able to vote because of the inner right. The Quakers, by the way, are such unsung heroes from the very, very beginning in terms of the philosophical basis of American history. And then, of course, let's not forget, Dr. King was a Baptist preacher. So the idea of a spiritual religious basis to our political convictions has to do with the fact that one of the things that a spiritual religious vision gives you is faith in that which is as yet unseen. So if because it's not what is now. Because you know on the other side of this wall, there is what could be. And on the other side of the wall, that which could be is actually that which shall be. And it's the issue of who's going to do it. And at a certain point, and I hope that we're at that point, where enough of us are ready to say, well, it doesn't have to be us. Did not come from a major political party. It came from the abolitionist party. Women's suffrage came from the Women's Party. Social Security came from the Socialist Party. So it's a rarely new aberrational phenomenon that we have such a codependent relationship with these political parties. The DNC said it has to be Joe, so it has to be Joe. What has happened to us? I want to point out to you that when George Washington gave his farewell address, he said that he was concerned about political parties because he was afraid that they would become factions of men who gave more loyalty to their party than to their country. And John Adams also said that he was afraid that political parties could become the biggest threat to democracy. The traditional role of the political party, even in my lifetime of some of us who are here, the traditional role of the political party is that it stands in its background and it lets the people decide. Concept, the people decide who will be the nominee. And at that point, the political party steps forward. We all heard this year, oh no, we have an incumbent president and we don't primary an incumbent. Oh really? Because we primary incumbent senators all the time. We primary incumbent congressmen all the time. We primary incumbent mayors all the time. There's no special assignation in the U.S. Constitution for incumbency. And some of us might be old enough in this room to remember that Lyndon Johnson was an incumbent president. And Eugene McCarthy primaried him. And Bobby Kennedy Sr. primaried him. And I'm old enough to tell you, we didn't think it was weird. We thought it was a democracy. And I also want to point out that it was important that Eugene McCarthy primaried him because that was laying stake on a political presidential level and the idea that the Vietnam War had to stop. So when you start saying, no, the political party will decide who you get to choose between, what country is this? So you're told, oh, you have choices, but you see how, in what ways they determine what your choices are, right? So they've been able to win the horse race here. But I'm hoping the conversation that we're having here tonight is one which you will recognize if you agree with me. I mean, it's democracy, you may or may not, but if you do agree with me, I hope that you will believe, as I do, that this is not the moment to shut up. That's what they have planned, right? And I'm still, for those of you who might, anybody in this room, who might have donated to my campaign, please know how grateful I am. I want to tell you, you paid for this ballot. That's what you paid for. Your race, your primary, on May 14th. Your write-in ballot will be between May 2nd and May 9th. And by voting for me, you're not voting for me so that I'm going to then be the nominee. You're voting for me so that the things that I'm about to discuss with you will still be in the conversation. You are voting for me if you believe that this is important enough, that it is our patriotic duty to inconvenience some people who deserve to be inconvenienced. You have. So let's have a vision of what could be. This is what's tragic to me. You know, when people have asked me, they asked me this last time, asked me this time, the answer is the same, except I'd say even more so. People would say to me, Marianne, what has been your experience of running for president? And my truth is that the system is even more corrupt than I feared. And it is disturbingly corrupt. And I'm a big girl, I'm not a victim, I'm who all of my life, but you should know some of the ways in which it's even worse than you might think. That's number one. But number two, I found that the voters, the people of the United States, are even more wonderful than I would have ever hoped. We are decent people. We are intelligent people. I'm not saying we're better than anyone else, because we're not. But we're certainly not worse. And my sense is that not only are we intelligent and decent, but I believe the American people are ready to be called to their nobility if someone would call us to do something noble. We are the Americans are hardwired to do great things. When we're not called to do great things, we're like wilted flowers. No one's calling us to do anything great. The system of power in this country is predicated on you thinking it's only about you. because that's what capitalism wants, and this malevolent strain of modern capitalism, and it's predicated on you being so necessarily involved with what it would take for you to survive, that in too many cases, Americans don't even have the bandwidth to be able to give enough time and attention to the entirety and the whole. And that works perfect for the power structure that currently runs this country. Let's go back to 1776. Let's go back to what was happening in that struggle between the slave owners of that time and those who truly stood on the principles of the Declaration of Independence, which would ultimately erupt, of course, in the Civil War. The dichotomy is between those who placed property rights first versus those who put human rights first. We're talking about the idea that some people at that time, and what we have to talk about is that it is also true today. There are people in every generation now, as much as ever, for whom the principles of freedom and equality really mean something. And we really get that this is not just about, well, I have the right to this, I have the right to that. I hope that our conversation tonight is a reminder to all of us. Not only does the Declaration of Independence give you rights, it gives you responsibilities too. We have the responsibility in every generation. Wow, this is in our hands. This is big. And it's our responsibility to show up for the moment that is our moment. Like I said, I don't care if you're 80 or 18. Which is not a time for men to be boys, it's not a time for women to be girls. It's a time for a serious maturity on our part. And to recognize that this thing, not only this set of principles and what they mean in people's lives, not only need to be protected from assault from anywhere outside, but also inside. And also it is our responsibility to expand those principles and their application as much as possible in our time. There have been people in every generation, and I feel that there are people today more than willing to show up for that. More than willing to struggle for that, to sacrifice for that, and in many instances throughout our history, they have died for that. But there have also been people throughout our history, starting at the beginning, down through our history, and even today, no differently than at any other time, for whom their own ideological and or financial purposes were such, their ideological or financial goals were such, that they had no intention whatsoever of allowing those principles to be actualized if in fact those principles got in the way of their ideological or financial goals. And they have proven throughout our history, and I'm sorry to say they're proving it today, that they would do whatever it takes, even unto truly atrocious things, to make sure that they were not. And other generations, as I said, have stood up. It's our turn. But in our time, it's not a specific institutional reality that we're up against. Abolition of slavery, okay, what's the solution? Abolition. Women are oppressed, what's the solution? An amendment, giving the woman the right to vote, and on and on. In our time, it's not a specific institutional reality. It's an economic paradigm. But it's an economic paradigm that now infects every corner of American society. It is an economic paradigm that now has such a grip on our economy and such a grip on our government that short-term profits for huge corporations takes precedence over the safety and the health and the well-being of the American people, of our children, of our animals, of people in other places of the world, and of the earth itself. Laura mentioned Citizens United. Citizens United, a Supreme Court decision that I believe one day will be seen as one of the worst that was ever passed in our history. 14 years ago. It now gives unlimited permission to huge corporate forces to so unduly influence our government that they've turned Washington into a system of legalized bribery. And that system now, in which in issue after issue, whether it's presidents or Congress people or Supreme Court. Laws are made and laws are executed in which the short-term profits of a donor class are placed before the safety, the health, and the well-being of the American people that our government is supposed to be serving. That is now the order of the day. It is now the new status quo. That status quo will not disrupt itself. That means that our government is not performing the function that the Declaration of Independence says it should. It is time for we the people to alter it. But we must alter it wisely and non-violently and responsibly. And if we do not alter it wisely and responsibly and non-violently, then some terrible things could happen in our future because people will only take so much. So, as I said before, it's very clear to me, you know, I'm having the same experience here today that I can say I've had hundreds of times on this campaign. No one has your phone out. What does that mean? We're up for this conversation. It means people care. People have an instinctive understanding that this country matters. Like I said, when people are called to be noble, we're noble. When people are called to be deeply intelligent, we rise to the occasion. And I believe, I've seen it, I've experienced it. People do want to have the conversation, okay, what do we do? What I believe, you could take any area of breakdown. You could take our health, you could take energy, you could take the state of the environment, you could take business, you could take economics, you could take education. We have the people who know what to do to provide a sustainable alternative. You name any area of wounding in this country, there are people who know how to do it different. We could do criminal justice different. We could do every system different. But the people with solutions are over here. The people with power are over here. And the people with solutions don't have the power. And the people with the power, too often, don't really want to hear the solutions. I mean, they might want to like, oh, it's so great what you guys are doing. But they don't want to actually integrate the solutions into their policies because that would not necessarily foster the corporate profit bottom line of their donor class. So you've got people with the solutions doing fundraisers. We raised $25,000. We worked hard. We raised $50,000. Meanwhile, the people with the power just gave a $50 million subsidy to the industries that are causing the problems that those people are solving. At what point do we, the people, say, what our ancestors have said, you know what? We must say it elegantly. We must say it in a sophisticated and non-violent way as possible, but we need to say it. That shit stops now. Yes. Obviously, you were not on your way here trying to make a better life. Or unless your ancestors were Native Americans who were indigenous to this continent for thousands of years, probably. Your ancestors came here in search of something new and better. We are all Americans. That's what we do here. We don't go with what has been. It is the most American thing in the world to say, that was how they did it then. We're not going to do it that way now. We're going to go somewhere else. And to call ourselves to that. But there are some characterological shifts that are necessary. You know, Martin Luther King said, we must have quantitative changes in our circumstances, but some qualitative shifts in our souls. This is not a moment where we need more data collection. The stuff we're going to be talking to you about in a minute, you all know it's true. This is not a moment when you don't know what's going on. I might mention a statistic or two, but we know what's going on. It's not that we need more data collection. It's not that we need more data analysis. We need more courage. We need more conviction. And these are the things that I believe we should be doing. These are the things that I believe a leader at this time should be doing. I also want to point out, like I said, I'm not delusional. Joe Biden has the nomination, but there have been so many false narratives around this, including we don't primary incumbent. But one of them has to do with who's qualified. The system's idea of who's qualified is someone qualified to perpetuate the system as it is. They think that only someone who is really schooled at driving the car that drove us into this ditch should possibly be considered qualified to drive us out of the ditch. So I just want to point out to you what the founders had to say about that. The founders said, in order to be president, you had to have been born here. You had to have lived here for 14 years. And you have to be 35 years old. It does not say in the Constitution you had to have been a congressman or a senator or a governor or anything in service to that system. Why is that? Because it's one of those places, very interestingly, in the Constitution, where what it doesn't say is as important as what it does say. It's saying you decide, in your generation, what is the skill set? What do you think is most necessary as a requirement? I personally believe that the requirements for this moment don't have to do with being a political car mechanic. The problem is that we don't have enough political car mechanics down the road of DC. The problem is we're on the wrong road. We don't need another technocrat, we need a visionary. I'm not the greatest visionary in the United States, but I am the only one who's running for the Democratic nomination. A fundamental economic U-turn. What's called, what Franklin Roosevelt called, an economic bill of rights. I want to begin with a statistic that all of you know, whether you know the specific statistic or not. And I'd like you to listen to what I'm about to say, whether you know it or not just with your head, but with your heart. You know, I heard James Doty, who is a neurosurgeon at Stanford. He said that neuroscientists and other physiological experts have determined that whereas we had been thinking that the brain was the intelligent center of the body, they're now realizing there's more of a connection between the brain and the heart than they used to believe. And they now realize that there's a partnership between the brain and the heart, which is the actual intelligent center of the body. And I think that same partnership between the head and the heart should be the intelligent center of society as well. Einstein said only a different kind of thinking. We need a different kind of thinking than that which we were at when we created our problems. We created our problems from a mindset that is all head and no heart. Okay? So let's listen and understand the problems with our heart as well. So I'm going to throw out this statistic. You might have heard it before, but even if you heard it, please hear it at a deeper level than you have before. You ready? 39% of all Americans now report that they regularly skip meals in order to pay their rent. I thought the economy was going really well. Turn on CNN or MSNBC, oh hey, the economy's doing so well. 39% of Americans who regularly skip their meals in order to pay for their rents. We have in the poorest neighborhoods around America, and there are way too many of those, the new thing now is how many people are selling their blood plasma in order to pay their rents. 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt. 68,000 Americans a year die from lack of health care. 18 million Americans cannot afford to buy the prescriptions that their doctors have prescribed for them. 75 to 90 million Americans are underinsured or uninsured. The issue of underinsurance is a big deal. How many people? I've had doctors say to me, I don't even know why I'm bothering to practice medicine. Somebody comes into my office, their insurance will cover for the visit, but the insurance won't cover the test that the doctor says you need to have. The insurance won't cover the operation the doctor says you need to have. How many Americans? You don't have this in any other advanced democracy. This is what I mean by we've been playing, everybody. We've been trained to expect too little. Every other advanced democracy, as a matter of fact, every other advanced nation, even those that aren't democracies, have universal health care. In none of those countries do you have people putting GoFundMe pages up on the internet to pay for an operation. Can you imagine if your child needs a life-saving operation and you can't afford it? That's what we have only in America. Now listen to this one. A majority of Republicans, I found this fascinating. A majority of Republicans as well as Democrats, not as many a majority, but a majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want universal health care. Right? Now, why do we have it? Well, they would have you think it was complicated. It's not complicated. It's completely corrupt. The only reason we don't have it is because of the institutionalized greed of the insurance companies. The reason 1.3 million people are rationing their insulin in this country. I was in England about 10 months ago, and I was giving a talk, and I mentioned that 1.3 million Americans ration their insulin, and I noticed the looks on the faces of people, disbelieving, because it doesn't even exist in any other advanced democracy. What do you mean that they ration their insulin? These things, there's a reason for these things, and that has to do with that institutional greed. And that institutional greed, which is now enabled by Washington, because Washington is doing more to enable and to advocate for this matrix of corporate greed, because that's its donor class, then it now functionally advocates for you. It is insurance companies, it is big pharmaceutical companies, it is big food companies, it is big agricultural companies, it's big chemical companies, it's big gun manufacturers, it is big oil, and it is defense contractors. And they are a matrix of corporate power, of corporate overlords. And that is why we do not have universal health care. That's why we have these profound college loans holding down an entire generation when those things didn't even exist before the 1970s, and by the way, do not exist in any other advanced democracy. It's why we have people who cannot afford their insulin. It's why we have food. We have carcinogens in our food here that they don't have in other advanced democracies. We don't have them. I mean, you might have seen the thing that went around, the viral thing that went around a few months ago. If you look at the ingredients in a bottle of ketchup here versus the ingredients in a bottle of ketchup in Canada, because of big food. And just like we know the big oil knew what they were doing, big food knows what it's doing. When it comes up with some ingredient that will increase the shelf life of a product, and if it increases the shelf life, it increases stockholder value. To these people, stockholder value is like a god. That's what trickle-down economics is. That's what began 80 years ago in this country, where everything became about stockholder value rather than the well-being of other stakeholders as well. And the idea here was that with trickle-down economics, and some of us are old enough to remember, the idea was that if you moved all your resources and the only responsibility of the corporation was its fiduciary responsibility to the stockholders, then that would be good, see? Because they'd make a lot of money and they'd be job creators. And that would be so good because then all that money would trickle down. And then that would lift all boats. Well, what has this resulted in? It's resulted in a $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% of Americans. It not only didn't lift all boats, it kicked millions of people off the boats that were already on. It has left millions of people in the water without even a life vest. Because these people's business model was never job creation. It was and is job elimination and worker exploitation and busting unions and demonizing unions and slashing taxes for the very, very rich. And that was what was started in the 1980s, and it is still the order of the day in an economic system that now is such that the people of the United States are serving an economic system rather than an economic system serving the people. If you want a great economy in America, help people thrive. But if you have an economic system which is based on the fact that 20% of us are doing well, 20% of us are thriving enough in this country, 20% is not enough. 70% of Americans say that they live with chronic economic stress. A majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. The majority of Americans cannot afford to absorb a $1,000 unexpected expenditure. As I said before, 39% of Americans say that they skip meals in order to pay their rent. A housing crisis, which is only getting worse. since 2012, the housing crisis, the homelessness in this country has increased 50%. And of course, with all that economic despair, of course it comes anxiety, it comes with that it comes anxiety and despair. And they call that a mental health crisis. But that's because all they want to look at is the symptoms. They don't want to look at the root cause because of how much they have created the root cause of so many of these things having to do with that economic system, which is so slanted in the direction of wealth and greater economic opportunity for those who have a few. So the real dichotomy in America is not left-right. The real dichotomy is powerful versus powerless. The real dichotomy is those who have access to wealth and ever more amounts of wealth versus those just struggling to get by. Now, it's important that we all remember, not every rich person is a greedy bastard. There are many very wealthy people, I don't know, maybe they're in this room, who would agree with everything that we're saying. This is not about individuals, this is about systems. I mean, I know a billionaire who once said to me, my taxes are so low, it's obscene. Right? So the issue is in us to realize whether it has to do with the fact that we don't have universal health care. Not only do the majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want universal health care, let me tell you what else the majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want. Tuition-free college and tech school, which once again, they have in every other advanced democracy. All of them have it. The people living in every other European nation, they're not worried about health care. They're not worried about how your kids are going to go to college. And guess what? Until the 1970s, people didn't have to worry about it here either. Until the 1970s, we had tuition-free college and tech school out of the University of California, University of Florida, and University of Texas. Right? So we should have an economic bill of rights, which is tuition-free college and tech school, universal health care in the form of an improved Medicare for all. And improved Medicare for all means that it also includes eyeglasses, hearing aids, dental, and college loan debt. We are withholding so much money that could just be in the system. These young people just want to get money and we won't let them. A man said to me one day, he said, you know, Marianne, the problem with our young people is that they don't respect capitalism. And I responded by saying, well, maybe if they had some capital, right? They would want to get in there. And I want to say to those of you who are older, like myself, would you please just take a moment to imagine who you were when you were in your 20s? Could you have handled tens of thousands of dollars worth of college loan debt when you were in your 20s? Would you be who you are today? The 20s are hard. They're not a mental illness, by the way. They're hard. They're hard for every generation. But debt is crippling, no matter how old you are. But to be in your 20s, to carry tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and why? Because you're trying to do what you're supposed to do, pursue happiness. And by the way, there's a specific racial element there too, because young people of color particularly were told the way you're going to close the wage gap is to get educated. You know, I've heard so many young people say to me, I came out with this debt, I do the math, I won't even get this thing paid off until I'm in my 50s. Now, if you're in your 50s, you know it's like a minute and a half. In your 20s, you don't know that yet. So people are like, I don't want this burden on my back, so I'll just go get a job in some other field so that I can get the college loan debt off my back sooner, so why did I even go to college? This is cruel. This is soulless. This is immoral. This is nothing other than the tentacles of a malevolent strain of soulless, unethical capitalism that now is like a heat-seeking missile looking for any area of possible profit center. And where is your greatest opportunity for a profit center? Where people are desperate for something. Oh, they really need that insulin, jack up the price. Oh, they really need that cancer drug, jack up the price. Oh, they really want an education, jack up the price. Now, Adam Smith, who is the main architect of free market capitalism, said it cannot exist outside an ethical context. There is such thing as righteous profit. There's such thing as a win-win. But the main economic model of this country today is not that. We need subsidized childcare as well, which is a crisis for so many Americans and which most advanced European democracies have. We need universal paid family leave. We need guaranteed sick pay. We need guaranteed jobs for those who wish to work, and we need a guaranteed living wage. We still have a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. In every major city in the United States, a living wage is over $20 an hour. We have 1/3 of our workforce work for less than $15 an hour, and half of them cannot find a place to live. Let's not forget how many of our homeless population work full time. In addition to that, we need other fundamental issues to repair. We must face down that forever war machine headquartered a few miles down the road, what is called in Washington the blob. We need a Department of Peace. We have a military academy. We should also have a peace academy. They play war games. We should also play peace games. We should be imagining a world without war 100 years from now and reverse engineer from there. We have got to grow up about this. You know, JFK said that if mankind does not put an end to war, war will put an end to mankind. I have great respect for the military. The problems we've had come from, the commanders-in-chief and the decisions that they make. And we're living in a time, in the modern era, where I don't care whether it's a Democrat or Republican, they fall in line with the military-industrial complex, and they fall in line with big oil. With the Department of Peace, just like we have armies of military personnel, we would have armies of peace builders. Now, peace building, for those who might not realize this, is an actual thing. It's an actual skill set. There is specific expertise that is involved. There are 4 factors which, when present, statistically indicate that there will be a higher level of peace and a lower level of conflict. And those 4 factors are the following: greater economic opportunities for women, greater economic educational opportunities for children, a reduction of violence against women, and an amelioration of unnecessary human despair. Now, this is true if you're talking about a corner of an American city or another place in the world. Large groups of desperate people anywhere should be seen as a security risk. Large groups of desperate people form a petri dish out of which it is almost inevitable that there will be a degree of personal and societal dysfunction that can overwhelm the system. But when we look at such things, it's much like health and sickness. We are no longer stuck within an allopathic model. An allopathic model of healthcare was one in which you didn't think you needed to take care of your nutrition, you didn't think you needed to take care of exercise, you didn't think you needed to really address your lifestyle, and then if you got sick, you hoped that there would be some external remedy that would suppress or eradicate the symptom. We know now, American, mainstream, like we've got to cultivate health, we've got to try to live a healthier lifestyle, right? The same with peace and conflict. Conflict and war are the absence of peace, not the other way around. Just like sickness is the absence of health, not the actively create health, which is what I do with my whole health plan. If you look at Marianne2024.com, please look at the issues just to once again impact the ethers of this is what's possible. And also, we can do the same with peace, and we should. We need to put attention into what will it take to create peace, foster peace. And also that will, in terms of international relations, mean a level of collaboration, not just healthy competition, but collaboration among nations, such as the world has never seen. And America should be leading the charge. America should not be hanging out in the background, supporting military activities that we've seen in our lifetime have little to do with anything other than increasing profits for Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and Boeing and so forth. Once again, this isn't anything we don't already know. But we're in a situation where the will of the people That's not, I don't see, I mean, you know, it's really profound when you run for office. You're traveling all over the country. I don't see the American people not ready to step up. The issue is that our political system, political media, industrial complex, those guys work together. It acts like a fist. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, if anybody doesn't toe the line with their corporatist agenda, they will do whatever it takes. Character assassination, psyops, kicking people off ballots. Trust me, I know, to make sure that that person is not in the game. Okay? We also need a Department of Children and Youth. We have American children at risk in ways that are absolutely unacceptable. We have children in the United States who are traumatized before preschool. I have met elementary school teachers who tell me they have little elementary school students on suicide watch. In public schools around this country, routinely they have trauma rooms. We should ask ourselves what's going on in this country that for so many children, childhood is a trauma. Mm-hmm. We have millions of American children, right around where you and I are, who go to schools and places where they do not have the adequate resources to teach a child to read. And if that child cannot learn to read by the age of 10, the chances of high school graduation drastically decreased. The chances of incarceration drastically increased. We know how many people who are violent offenders in America's prison system had multiple adverse childhood experiences, did not learn how to read, and so forth, and lacked the kind of economic and social opportunities. This is not about not holding people accountable, but it is about addressing root causes and realizing that we as a society, if we really want these things to change, must address these root causes. But the system isn't really that into addressing the root causes, even there, because of so much money made on the allopathic remedies, which means if anybody acts out, simple enough, build more prisons, drop more bombs. Once again, if that paradigm is going to change, it's going to be because we change it. Obviously, we need to adjust just transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy. That means we should declare a climate emergency if we need to, no matter whether it's a Democrat or Republican. Even now, we're continuing to ramp up rather than ramp down fossil fuel extraction. And the last major core issue that I believe that all of us should hold in mind, to recognize this is possible. This would represent an America that works to us move towards these things. And that is, I think it's time to end America's war on drugs. In 1971, Richard Nixon started the war on drugs. Some of you are old enough to remember Watergate, right? So Watergate, some of Nixon's aides went to prison. One of them was a man named John Ehrlichman. When he came out, he was a completely transformed person. It was like a shocking transformation. And he spilled the beans about a lot of things, including Nixon and the inception of the war on drugs. Nixon said it was public enemy number one. He knew that it wasn't. It was in large part, actually, an attack on black communities in the United States. Black and white Americans use drugs roughly the same rate, but you don't have police raiding white neighborhoods to see if anybody's taking drugs here, right? We also know that a black American is likely to receive 20% longer for of time served for a criminal conviction. 46% of America's federal prisoners are there for non-violent drug offenses. We have spent $1 trillion over the last 50 years on the drug war. No American thinks it's helped to solve the problem. It has exacerbated the problem. We had, by the way, when I was in college, we had 300,000 people in prison. We now have 2.3 million. It actually feeds the prison industrial complex. We spend $100 billion a year right now on the war on drugs. For that money, we could be funding a world-class network of recovery options. Most addicts want to get sober, right? So we don't need a drug czar. We need a recovery czar. We should treat drug addiction the way they do in countries like Portugal as a health issue, not as a criminal issue. And I'll tell you what else ending the drug war will do. Ironically enough, it will help us with a couple of things. It'll help us with the southern border because it will help undercut the power of the drug cartels. because they thrive on our black market. You know what else it will do? It will help us get control of the one we do need to be seriously worried about, and that is fentanyl. Start regulating these things. Start regulating these things and regulating for fentanyl and making sure that becomes part of the issue, and then also it will give us the resources and the bandwidth to take that one on, because that one's unacceptable, and we should see it as the weapon against us that it is. So these are the kinds of issues, these are the kinds of policies that I believe represent not only an economic U-turn in this country, but represent a way that we can turn away from the iceberg that we're heading towards now. With one major political party, we're heading straight towards it. It could take many forms, but whether it's AI, whether it's climate change, whether it's nuclear catastrophe, we are not currently paving a path towards a sustainable and enlightened future for this country. The other major political party, under the direction of its corporatist wing, is simply heading towards the iceberg more slowly, and it will hit it at a different angle. And what we need is to turn things around. But it's going to have to be a generation that says that it's going to happen because we say so. Now, Abraham Lincoln, I want to finish with this. He stood on the battlefield at Gettysburg. Gettysburg was the battle which determined the fact that the Union would in fact win the war. So he goes to the battlefield. Speaking of the men who had died for the Union there, he said that they had given the last full measure of devotion so that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people would not perish from the earth. And I submit to you what we all know. It's perishing now. We're not functioning as a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We are functioning as a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. It's not just that our democracy is in trouble. Our democracy has already been functionally replaced by oligarchy, ruled not by the people, but by the very, very rich because of the undue influence. And at this point, we have such a collapsed middle class. You can't have a thriving democracy where there's a collapsed middle class. For those of you who are young, I'm going to tell you something. And those of you who are older, going to say, yeah, she's right. So it's going to sound to you like I'm describing a land long ago and far away. You're probably going to feel like it might be a fairy tale, but I'm telling you it's not a fairy tale. I want to talk to you about the 1970s. The average American couple could afford a house. And the average American couple could afford a car. And the average American couple could afford a yearly vacation. And the average American couple could afford, if they wished, for one parent to stay home and be with the kids. The average American couple was such that one salary could support a family of 4, and that average American couple could afford to send their kids to college. You call that a thriving middle class. That is collapsed now. When they tell us that we need an economy that supports the middle class, what middle class exactly? We have an ever-shrinking group of Americans who can afford easy access to quality health care and afford easy access to quality education. And so at this point, as Louis Brandeis, the late Supreme Court Justice, said, you can have large amounts of money concentrated in the hands of a very few, or you can have democracy, you cannot have both. So that is why I'm here. This conversation should not end just because we've been slapped down, like, no, talk about those things anymore. This country is acting like an alcoholic family system. And the kids are all anxious and really thinking, Mommy and Daddy are both crazy. Because Mommy and Daddy are saying, no. You keep crying like that, we're going to give you something to cry about. I mean, this is like, what? And we can't take our country back until we take it back in our minds and hearts. People feel powerless, but we aren't powerless. We are powerful once we pierce the illusion of our powerlessness. And that means that there have to be those changes on the inside that Martin Luther King talked about too. We can't just think if I vote every 2 years or every 4 years, I've done my duty. No, not at this point. We have to all of us begin to see activism spiritual activism as well as political activism, is simply a layer of a well-lived, meaningful life. You know, politicians come to a state and say, send me to Washington to fight for you. I never during this year asked anybody to send me to Washington to fight for them. That does not sound to me like a very fun thing to do. But I have said throughout this year, I'd like to go to Washington and co-create with you a new chapter of American history. In Washington, it's also what's happening in our local communities, it's what's happening on the level of the State House. We all know that. And something happens when you just wake up to that, say every morning of your life in whatever way possible. How can I help? That's the aha. How can I help? When Mahatma Gandhi was asked, who is the leader of the Indian independence movement, he said, the small still voice within. Each of us, whatever field you're in, to provide the alternative to show up for this moment. And I think politics is our collective assignment. So remember that Martin Luther King talked about the desegregation of the American South. He said the desegregation of the American South is the political externalization of the goal of the civil rights movement. The ultimate goal, he said, is the establishment of the beloved community. The ultimate goal is a state of love among each other, and I also think that's the way we will get there. It's not only the goal, but the way we will achieve it. I think all of us, and I tell you, see this on the left as much as on the right, this smugness, this arrogance, this self-righteousness, we wipe it off our faces. Because nobody owns this country, nobody owes it to you to agree with you. Other generations didn't owe you anything. This country belongs to all of us. Martin Luther King said you have very little morally persuasive power with people who can feel your underlying contempt. So if we all get to that sweet space, I met, and I know I want to end this section, but I'll tell more about it if you want me to in a few minutes. I met 2 Trump supporters over the last few days, one in Eugene, Oregon, and one in Los Angeles, that showed me a lot, made me think a lot, and I will just leave you with this. They were both very, very nice people. And the problem was not what Trump is saying to them, the problem is what the Democrats aren't saying to them. I saw it so clearly. So, I have a personal formula, kind of works for me. Might work for you. You might want to tweak the language a little bit. I find there's something really powerful in it. And if we all practice it in whatever way is true for us, we're going to have a political miracle here. Pray in the morning and kick ass in the afternoon. Now, independents can vote in the Democratic primary. You know, it's so interesting. Every state is very different on this stuff. Independents can vote in the Democratic primary. Republicans cannot. So if you're a Republican and you would like to vote for this, you're going to have to change your registration just for this vote. Okay? Now, also, if you're interested, you will receive a flyer. You see one in the back, and also you will be given one when you leave. There will be a volunteer Zoom meeting this Wednesday at 7 p.m. And if you sign up for that, and you'll see the QR code also on the flyer, then you will be sent a link. And it's just about making Democrat a year has at least 5 people that, you know what, probably needs to hear. You know, I think something was said here that I agree with, and this is the deal. We've gotten 400,000, about 400,000 votes in the primary so far, which, given the extraordinary obstructions, is not nothing. It is very small if you're talking about winning the nomination. But you know, if it's a close race in November, then it's not small at all. In other words, the more votes we get, the more eyebrows we raise. The more votes we get, the more someone might say, what is she saying that makes some people interested? Oh, maybe we should revisit Medicare for all. Oh, maybe we should revisit tuition-free college and tech school. Oh, maybe we should revisit the living wage. I believe, for those of you who are Democrats, I don't think the danger is people voting for Trump. The danger is people staying home. The danger is people staying home. Also, there's Bobby Kennedy, there's Cornel West, there's Jill Stein. The Democrats will win. I think anybody will win if they actually offer the American people a way to materially improve their conditions of their lives. Right now, you're not going to win just by saying people be scared or be very, very scared. This is not going to be like 2020. It's going to be like 2016. And I saw an ad for president the other day, and somebody was saying, we should elect him because he gets things done. Who are you talking to? Are you talking to the hungry person? Are you talking to the person who cannot afford their chemo? Are you talking, and let me tell you something, some of the people who were the ones who made sure, because they stood in line for 7 hours, whether it was young people or black people, I mean, these are the people, the Democratic Party is bleeding the voters it most needs. Young people, black voters, Asian voters, in some cases now Latino voters, because I don't know what they're thinking. And at this point, it's not to me about a political party at all, but it is about the fact that I believe that if somebody was to say to the American people, there's a reason for you to get up and vote. And there's a reason, because life can be better for you when we stand for policies that will make it better for you, then I think the American people would take it from there. Okay, now, would you like to do some Q&A? Would you like to do some further? Okay, so we can talk about anything you want to talk about, ask, or share, whatever, and we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. If you want to talk.
Speak back to the focus on international politics that are on everyone's mind right now.
Well, we have a couple of things going on. We have Ukraine, of course, and we have what's happening in Gaza and in Israel. I think that President Biden has given Bibi Netanyahu way too much leeway, and I think he realizes that now. If I had been president, I would have said, okay, you want to get rid of Hamas, that we can go with. How are you going to do it? What's going to be your strategy? Exactly what you're going to do? How are you going to protect civilians? What's going to happen the day after? And by the way, you're going to have to accept the international community, including us, will not accept a pre-October 7th reality, so you need to start recognizing there will be a two-state solution, and none of us can afford to support anything else. That last line might not have been something too acceptable on October 8th, but it should certainly be something more that ultimately that's what we hope we will get to. I think he handled the Iran situation the other day quite well, but he has had an unwillingness to say no to Bibi Netanyahu. Completely defeating Hamas, absolutely. That, yes. But remember, the Palestinian people are not Hamas any more than the Israeli people are Bibi Netanyahu. So I believe the United States, like I said, our first principle is all men are created equal. And I don't think that just means Americans. And I think that our policies should stand in that situation for absolutely equal and equally robust commitment to the safety and the security and the sovereignty of both peoples. And I don't know why it was ever given on the kind of carte blanche level that it was. It should have been given on the understanding we want to see what your strategy is. I mean, I understand they're a sovereign nation, but we also are a sovereign nation. We don't have to give them money or weapons unless it's right for us. and our humanitarian values. And I, even just recently, he finally had a call 6 months into it, where he clearly, I love how the president said, he was going to have a come to Jesus moment with Bibi Daniel, which no wonder it didn't work. He finally did, and he made a demand not too long ago, and those centers opened up for those trucks. I don't understand it. I appreciated the president's moral clarity on October 7th, but the same moral clarity should have been shown on October 8th for both the Israeli people as well as the Palestinian people. When he said on October 8th, I'm going to be meeting this morning with Jewish American leaders, I remember thinking to myself, he should be saying, and this afternoon, I'm meeting with Arab American leaders, Muslim American leaders, Palestinian American leaders. And that's where we are. It does seem that the president has started to get the message of the political price that he's paying here. The majority of American people are not with this. But he simply got to, now you have even very mainstream Democratic politicians saying enough is enough. And Nancy Pelosi saying, and Chuck Schumer, Senator Schumer, had made a speech a few weeks ago that I thought was very, very fine. I agreed with every word of it about how Netanyahu is in the way of peace. And, we all know what's going on there, and that he, keeping it going is helpful to him politically or whatever. So once again, destroying Hamas, absolutely, but how you do it is absolutely everything. And we need now, I think here in Maryland you do have either a ceasefire candidate slot on your ballot or uncommitted, and I will tell you how I feel about that. When the ceasefire ballot initiative happened in Michigan, and I raised my child in Michigan, I know Michigan quite well. I respected it in Michigan because Michigan does have a large Arab American, Muslim American population. So a ceasefire vote in Michigan I felt was a very strong, powerful, and meaningful exercise of democracy. As a matter of fact, I had suspended my campaign. A week later wanted to unsuspend, but didn't until after that because I wanted to show respect for that. Even though we still got quite a few votes in Michigan, right? In these other states, please know here in Michigan, in Maryland, you're still electing Biden delegates. So it has this, it has this face of something so radical, but it's actually not. What would be the more radical thing to do is to actually elect a ceasefire candidate, right? To help send to Chicago a ceasefire candidate who will talk about the fact we need a ceasefire, who will talk about, obviously, the release of hostages, and obviously the creation of a two-state solution. Now, those on the far right as well as the far left want a one-state solution. A one-state solution is just the setup for the bloodiest civil war you can possibly imagine, because the Jews are going to say, okay, we're in charge, and the Arabs are going to say, okay, we're in charge. These people, it's not going to be like right now you could throw them all together and say, okay, will you be nice, okay? Yeah. It's going to be a while before that happens.
Maybe one day.
Pardon?
Maybe one
Well,
day.
I personally do not agree with that. I respect that you do. I believe that both, listen, neither people is going anywhere. Neither one is going anywhere. And whether it is an Arab says it or a Jew says it, from the river to the sea is a racist comment. Nobody gets from the river to the sea. Neither one of them get from the river to the sea. They both live there. And I think that anybody in this country who exalts the rights of one people at the expense of the rights of the other is not serving. And I think that that's, there's a line in the Course in Miracles, God does not give you victory in battle. He lifts you above the battlefield. Somebody told me So whose tears am I supposed to ignore? We have to find that place within ourselves. I wrote a piece that you can see on the internet, and you see it on my website, or you can find it elsewhere, for Newsweek magazine, I think in 2021 or 2022, about Israel and Palestine. And I think the title of the article is "The Tragedy of Unprocessed Trauma." So the psychic center of Israeli politics is the trauma inflicted by the Nazis. And the psychic center of Palestinian politics is the trauma inflicted by the Israelis. But if you have two people facing each other, or in this case, two peoples, dealing with trauma that has not been processed, there is an emotional incapacity to be present for the suffering of the other. Now, I've been there 5 times, and to me, one of the greatest tragedies here, I remember when I met, one of my visits, I met the American ambassador to Israel, and he said, the majority of Palestinians and Israelis do not hate each other, they fear each other. And I have seen so much of the peace building work that has gone on there. And of course, it's just been, all of that has certainly been put back. But I have seen it, and I have to believe that it's still true. That on the other side of this, and it will take some time, but there are people among the Palestinians and the Israelis, and all over this world, by the way, and that will be your generation, willing and ready to take the baton to a new era of collaboration. You know, there are these schools, and I don't know what's going on with them right now, I can only imagine. But there are schools in Israel called, what did you say? Yes, hand-in-hand schools. Have you been there? Do you know the hand-in-hand schools? No. You heard? Okay. So this is what they do in the hand-in-hand school. In every classroom, there is the teacher speaking Hebrew and another teacher speaking Arabic. And the children learn both languages. Because remember, 20% of the Israeli population is Arab. This issue of being an ethno-state, no, it's not. The third most powerful, I'm not saying it doesn't have some apartheid laws, but that's very different than calling an apartheid state when you have your third largest political party is Arab and 20% of your people are Arab. Now, that's not justifying any mistakes here. I'm just saying that a nuanced conversation which recognizes the complication here is appropriate. So in these schools, they are taught not only Arabic, not only Hebrew, but they're taught the history of both peoples. I've seen it. David, we call it Independence Day, but Muhammad calls it the Nakba. And these little kids have it explained when they're synapses. See, if you take a 40-year-old and you say, especially now, that's a tragedy in this moment, you say to a 40-year-old, well, you have to see their side of it. They killed my brother. I don't care who it is. You say to a 5-year-old, well, these synapses are still, this is where it's going to come from. That little David says to Muhammad, I'm sorry. But, you know, in Israel, the hand-in-hand schools, just like what I was saying here, the people with solutions don't have the power. You know, it's treated like, oh, they're very nice. That's very nice. If I were president, they'd be the first people invited into the Oval Office. And we need that just transition from a war economy to a peace economy, just like we need that just transition from a good economy to a good economy. Hello, China.
So we're in Baltimore, and our democracy is at stake in Baltimore City. We have 2 candidates, not really people. We have candidates. They're not Democrats. They're running as a Democrat for mayor.
For mayor? You're talking about the Baltimore mayor race?
We have the current mayor who swindled away our conduit system. We voted, it was a landslide, 76.7%. 2022 to prohibit the sale, transfer, and franchise of small case BG&E Exelon. Our prices keep going up. That wasn't happening when BG&E was its own entity.
So,
The other candidate is Sheila Dixon, who has gotten over $500,000 from David Smith, who owns the Baltimore Sun, as well as a Buddy Armstrong Williams, who's from North Carolina, so it's not quite locally owned. They are proponents of destroying John Kerry's presidential run with the SWIFT votes, with the videos, with everything. And let me tell you, everything is about local. Sinclair, last year, and I'm sure still is going on. So for instance, if you live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you don't have local news in Tulsa, Oklahoma anymore.
that's right.
Here, everything is from Oklahoma City. I've seen weather reports here that never say the word Baltimore. It says Tulsa, because Mr. Smith lives just north of Baltimore City. So we need to vote for Boo. But the thing is,
So the first
we
and the
need independent candidates because unfortunately, one of those two, the current mayor is bought by Greater Baltimore Committee. This is an entity that is racist, that destroyed the streetcar system in Baltimore and destroyed our ability to have our transportation system given to the city where kids are sandwiched in city buses, where poorest people here pay for the transportation for people in the counties, there may be 5 people on a bus. There is so much, but the thing is, the whole thing has to be rent control, and this government is doing everything to give everything to developers. Give one man Harbor Place. When most of Maryland is unseated, Baltimore City is unseated, which means the Native people never got any money. And there are kind of stoned up people. There are Susquehannocks. They are coming together. And I wrote a piece of legislation in 2001.
I want to ask everybody here, most of you are from Baltimore, obviously, right? So is everybody aware of the mayoral election that Cheryl is referring to? And everybody knows who these people are, et cetera. So
They don't know about Greater Baltimore Committee. They don't know the history.
Is there a question?
Pardon?
Is there a question? I've
Is
heard
there
a
a question, Cheryl?
I have a lot to share.
Well,
And
you get your own venue. I came
my
here from
question
Marianne.
is, my question is, should I continue to be living on $943, lose my home because the property insurance goes up, and I solved my problem 4 years ago of being on the street homeless, and I can't afford rent, so I could afford to buy, and I could well be a council member or even mayor with everything I've done, with 2+ years, with giving them everything. This wasn't an idea for me to run 2 years ago. It was just let me help the city government. Maybe they can find a place for me so I can move off the system completely.
I know.
And so you vote. Should I be abject property and be kicked out of my house because my house is in neglect and I need it fixed and I can't find people to work because people don't want to work in the city and some other issues?
Okay, Cheryl.
Or
I need to move
will you
on.
please see my business, my brilliance, finally?
You know what, Cheryl? I've known you for a long time.
Let's talk after. Don't do this to me again. Don't mute me.
Pardon?
Don't mute me. Don't mute me. Don't mute me. You muted me. I'm not going to talk about it now.
Well, I'm muting you now simply because I have to take responsibility for
I
my
found out that my
So, Sean, give me the microphone back. I'll be glad to talk to you at the end of the evening.
This is my peace resolution.
Okay.
I couldn't have done it without you.
Michelle, you're a really smart woman, and I'm not surprised, and I expect that when
I thought it's a legal document. We
I
can
will
get the native people their land, their harbor, their wars of the basin.
My assumption is in a room like this, because everybody did nod their head when I said, are you familiar with this? I assume that you're in a room with like-minded people.
I'm gonna connect, that's what I'm asking.
And they will vote according to their conscience, and I would assume that the vast majority of people here, given what you just said, my assumption would be that the majority of people will be here voting as you said. And I will be glad to speak to you when this is all over, and I have to go on because other people in this room who have questions.
Sure. Big Naraja and Sneed.
Anybody else? Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, this gentleman and then that gentleman.
Don't give me the mic, I can speak loudly
But
enough.
it's not for you, babe, it's for everybody else.
Everyone else can hear me unless there are people online.
Okay.
Marianne, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
for running. I was not impressed, I'll admit, at what I've seen on TV, but I've been very much impressed with what I saw today. My question for you is, give me a operational instruction for voting. What I heard, I think, and correct me if I heard wrong or misinterpreted, was vote in the primary for Marianne Williamson, because that will send a signal. Okay, I could do that. And I'm in Maryland, so it doesn't matter who I vote for. I know who's going to win, and so do you.
Well, he's already won. I mean, he's
Yes.
already the nominee.
Yes, but in the general election, I also know who is going to win in Maryland. But if we're,
No, hold on, I'm curious.
well, Biden will win in Maryland. If he doesn't win Maryland,
Yeah.
okay.
I get it, of course, I get it, okay.
But if we were in Pennsylvania, let's imagine we were in Pennsylvania. What is your instruction to people in this room? Should they vote for you or not
In November?
in November?
No, I will not be on the ballot in November. We weren't even able to get on, unfortunately, we were not on the ballot even in the primaries, we were not able to get on in Pennsylvania. We won in 40 states. But you asked an interesting question. So the answer is not me in November. Unless, profound changes occur.
Yes.
Your choices in November will be Joe Biden, Donald Trump. I assume Bobby will get on in Pennsylvania. I don't know if Jill Stein's on in Pennsylvania, and of course we don't know. I mentioned earlier that when Mahatma Gandhi was asked who is the leader of the Indian independence movement, he said, the small still voice within. You said, what is your instruction? Leadership in the 21st century isn't top-down. It's about holding the space for the brilliance of others. I'm in the same inquiry you're in. I've seen what I've seen. On the other hand, what I've seen is not going to be, for me, my North Star. So I can only tell you the principle that will guide my decision-making in November. But you should follow your own conscience and your own heart. My guiding principle, and I'm not saying it should be yours, it is mine. I will vote in such a way as seems to me to create the least possibility for Donald Trump to be president again. But I'll tell you something. Ultimately, that will not be enough. We're going to have, and that's why I'm here, we're going to have to continue this conversation and change things. Because at this point, just keeping Donald Trump out of the White House, something bigger than that is active now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Deborah?
Just really quickly, I just want to say thank you so much, Marianne, for piercing us. Just want to say thank you so much, Marianne, for piercing us out of our trance across the country. Just your voice and what you're doing. Anyway, just keep on going, girlfriend.
I never used the right word. We've been in a trance. And this whole thing about the DNC and how, in my own race, the by the book character assassination, it has to be Joe, all of that stuff. Rather than the American people, I think maybe the voters should have a conversation with whoever is FEC registered, legally qualified person and talk about it. And Americans really have been, between social media and the way these huge corporate entities work, we have been in a trance.
And I
Did
think
you have your hand up, Stanley?
Thank you. I watched you 4 years ago, Democratic debate, and you crushed them. You
Yes.
were. You were saying the right things. You crushed it. And I think it's not just me saying that, because you were the most Googled candidate, I believe.
Well, in 49 states. And you know why I was the most Googled in Montana? I love this. I was the most Googled candidate in 49 states. The one where I was Montana. And that's because the governor of Montana was on the debate stage, and obviously all these people in Montana went, "Did you know our governor was running?"
Well, see, that's my point. So right after that, what happened to the media coverage? Why did it all of a sudden give a precedent? And my bigger question is, what can we as force multipliers and influencers do to help with that?
Okay. So what happened was, within 3 days, everywhere you looked, she's crazy, she's kooky, she's anti-vax, she's anti-science, she's a crystal lady. You couldn't open up your computer, you couldn't hear anybody talk. Like one line taken from a book, in one of my books, I'm talking about metaphysics and Buddha and how Einstein said that time and space are illusions of consciousness, albeit a persistent one. And how this world, the metaphysical construct, this is not the ultimate reality. It's just basic metaphysics, I write, and they took one line, sickness is an illusion. Which if you take that out of context, it is so contrary to really my entire career, actually. So they were satisfied last time to just convince you that I was a crazy woman, kooky, right? This time, because of those viral moments, they were not amused. And whereas last time they were satisfied to just make me appear like a joke, this time they came right at me. You'll notice last time I was on CNN television. Blacklisted completely here, which I believe is complete journalistic malpractice.
absolutely.
And MSNBC blacklisted. When my numbers were the same as Nikki Haley, hers was referred to as a surge, mine was ignored. Mainstream media sources that all of us should be able to trust, saying that the president had no opponent, a complete invisibilization, complete erasure, stories about me that would never be written about me. My tenure at the office, from everything I've heard, is no different than Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, which I have seen, Bernie Sanders, and Joe Biden. The things that have been, what they do is they create, and talk about a trend, they create a doppelganger. And she's crazy, she's spooky, and I felt like it was the 16th century, and we're talking about witches here. She's crazy, she's evil, like I was the evil witch in Hansel and Gretel. And it's not funny, actually. Because, I never felt in my career being a woman in any way limited me or limited people's perception of me, but the pure misogyny, things the way they would contextualize the story. This year I noticed I'm a self-help guru, self-help author. They won't even let you think I'm an author. And of course the one that kills me is how they say I'm not a serious candidate. What you and I were talking about here all night tonight, I'm the only really serious candidate. I hope you will be on the Zoom call on Wednesday night, because what you can do is take videos that you like on our site, etc. Think of 5 people that you know, and I do want to know, sir, you in the back there, you said you weren't impressed on television? I'm just curious which one you know. But anyway, that's the answer. I hope you will. Because you know, it's all about maximizing. Like I said, everybody in this room knows 5 people. And what they say in politics is for every person who comes to hear you live, there are 50 people who are looking at you even though they didn't come to your event.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So really, there's nothing like your enthusiasm, if you feel there's a reason. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Did that answer all your questions, sir? So yeah, it's like I said before, I'm a big girl. I have a life I can, but you need to know. That's what they do to anyone. Like when people say to me, it's not personal. It's not. I'm not towing the corporatist bottom line. And I find it particularly sad as a lifelong Democrat. You know, they used to say, my friend Olivia, who was here, she was here, she said something I've repeated many times, she's so right. She said, you know, they used to say that Republicans fall in line and Democrats fall in love. It's become the opposite. Democrats have fallen in line. The DNC says there has to be Joe. These are the people who gave us Trump the first time.
Yes.
They gave Trump the what? Who is this small group of elites? It's so interesting, isn't it? The Republican Party has, in general, the more elitist policies, but a weirdly more egalitarian relationship to its own constituency. The Democratic Party has, for the most part, the most egalitarian policies, but a weirdly more elitist relationship to its own constituency. This smugness of this, I don't know, you don't defeat democracy, you don't defeat a threat to democracy by suppressing democracy. People would say to me so much this year, Marianne, why are you doing this? Don't you realize fascists are at the door? And I would always say I'm doing it because the fascists are at the door. The fascists should never have gotten so close to the door. Franklin Roosevelt said that we would never have to worry about a fascist takeover in the United States as long as democracy delivers on its promises. That's the problem here. We've left the doors and the windows wide open. If democracy was delivering on its promises, we would have universal health care like in every other advanced democracy. We would have tuition-free college and tech school like in every other advanced democracy. We would have a guaranteed living wage. We would have a fairer economy. We would have a fairer tax structure. So democracy is not delivering on its promises. So can I tell you my story about the 2 punk people in that? So I'm in Eugene, Oregon. I'm at the airport, and there's a cafe is right connected to the gate. I was going in, I was hungry, and there were a bunch of tables, but I'm looking around, and there's this one woman, and she said, do you want to sit with me? And I thought it was kind of weird, but she seemed nice, and why not? So I said, well, sure. She's a very nice lady. She referred to herself as very conservative, and then I said, are you like Trump conservative? And she said, yeah. I said, well, doesn't it bother you? She only doesn't mean that stuff. And she also told me she was a very religious Christian. Very nice lady. We had a very nice conversation. But this is what was so interesting. Everything I said to her, she said, oh, I agree with that. Everything I said to her, I was like, she said, oh, I agree with that completely. And even though I cannot tell you rationally why she is a Trump supporter, it was very obvious to me why she's not a Democrat. it was very clear, because the Democratic Party isn't saying to her the things that I was saying to her. If you say, well, I agree with that, she thinks there should be universal health care. She thinks there should be tuition-free college and tech school. We're not offering it. In 2016, there were two candidates who said to people, the system is rigged against you. You have every right to be angry about it. One was Bernie Sanders and one was Donald Trump. The difference was that Bernie meant it. And then when Hillary came in and said, we're gonna just continue with the success of the last 8 years, millions of people said, what success? I'm drowning here. So for Biden to go out there and say, let's just continue and finish the job, when you've got 39% of Americans who can't eat regularly. Really? And another thing they're doing, which I'm telling you, I don't like it. A big thing they were doing to me was making sure I was off the ballots in places. They're doing the same thing to Bobby Kennedy. That's not the way you righteously fight an opponent. You should be supporting democracy. You fight your opponent by having better ideas. That's how you fight your opponent. You defeat your opponent, have better ideas. So I'm hoping that some of what we're talking about here, if I could get some candidates, otherwise they certainly won't want me in Chicago at the convention. I know you'd like to walk into a room of some of those people and look at me. I'm supposed to support, I think, they asked me on Washington Journal the other day, why don't you just, support the president? I said, I think I am supporting the president. Because I'm saying things which these people, I hope they hear.
And they are, they're responding to some of those.
The one other gentleman that I met, he was an Uber driver in Los Angeles. And it was one of those things where he heard me on the phone, he turned, Marianne, are you Marianne? Marianne is in the car. Guess what? He's a really big fan and stuff like that. And guess who he voted for? He voted for Trump. And everything, and then he started telling me, he said, this is how I see America, okay? Let me tell you how I see America. Everything he said was like, I'm with you 100%. I'm with you 100%. I'm with you 100%. In his mind, that was everything I said would make him vote for Trump more than vote for Biden. And even though I don't understand how you get to Trump from that, I did understand how, well, the Democratic Party isn't saying these things. And they were both such nice people. And that, I think it's so important for us to remember. I think we all are really tempted to make stereotypes of the people who don't agree with us politically. We have to purify our own hearts and that kind of thing. And I just want to say one thing. Martin Luther King said, you have very little morally persuasive power with people who can feel your underlying contempt. And that's what I had with that woman. We had a whole lunch together, and we were so nice, and we were both, I could tell we were both working on it. She was lovely.
So I have a compliment, comment, and question.
Okay.
So when Beyonce was doing an interview one time, she talked about how she could have just put on her flower crown and stayed away from pressing into Black issues in her performances. And I feel very similar with you that you could have stayed in the world of spirituality, written your books, your talks, and not have had conversations about politics, and not have had maybe so much hate or so much fear.
And a lot more money.
Yeah, and a lot more money, right? And you wouldn't have a tax on your name, and you wouldn't have to do any mental fatigue or whatever that comes with it. So I appreciate you for that. And I know I have no place to say, please continue that for all of your days, but I hope that you will, because I think all of us in this room feel it. And we, I've met people, because I try to go to your events, who have never read your books or listened to your talks. And I say, what, you haven't? Why are you here? And because I like what you're saying about politics. And so I think you've touched both sides. And my common question is going into finding the capstone within our own lives, pulling out the envelope in which God has written for us, and reading it and doing what He would have us do. I think One thing is the next book should be A Politics of Hope. You've written A Politics of Love. What can you, well, after this next book, but what can you tell us that's hopeful? Because I think one of the things that you said, the era of data collection is over, and it's now time for us to do. When we go home, we're not as filled with as much hope as we are with you right now, right? When we watch the news, we're not necessarily filled with hope. When we talk to our parents who don't agree with us, or our neighbors, or our coworkers who don't agree with us, we're not filled with hope, but when we are here with you, we're filled with hope. How do we take that hope home with us?
Okay. I'm just reminding you of something already in you. I'm just speaking to something. I want to tell you what I've seen in my career. Excuse me. I have had the privilege of being with people throughout my 40-year career in some of their darkest moments. They just got the test results back, it's cancer. They just found out someone who they love very much has died suddenly. They have found out that their child they just found out their child is addicted to meth or whatever it is. Oscar Wilde has a line in one of his books. He describes someone, he said, he is deeply shallow. So it's hilarious. That this man is deeply shallow. That's American popular culture constantly inundates us with ultimately unimportant things. I have watched people who I would say lived deeply shallow lives, just told by the doctor it's cancer, or AIDS, or your child is very ill, or whatever it is. And I've watched it so many times. I've watched how a person who lived a very distracted life, in the first 5 minutes, layers of ultimately unimportant things just fall away. And I've watched them become, within 5 minutes, transformed, looking at the doctor, what do we have to do? And I think that that's where we are now. I hope that, because you're adults, you can take it. You know, it's very sad, I always say it's so sad when a child never gets to experience their childhood. Well, there's something very pathetic about an adult who never gets around to being one. And we've had a very adult conversation with them. I have full confidence and faith. We can take it from here. And if you feel that there's something really wrong about the fact that I was treated the way I was treated, that's good. That's good for you to realize we have a problem here. Whether I agree with her about everything or not. You know, it's not even about me. But wow, anybody that that doesn't tell their mind will do whatever it takes to make you think, no, you look out there, unqualified, crazy woman, hit pieces. And also, not only were they by the book character assassination, but how people who think of themselves as too clever to ever fall for that kind of thing, go right for it. So I think we're all processing. And then the next thing will occur. No one person is indispensable. That's a basic process. You know, we're all, it's un-American to think one person is it. That's what's so horrifying about Trump, you know? Only I can fix it. There is no only I can fix it. Only we can fix it. You know what I'm saying? So, hope is born of participation in hopeful solutions. So I can tell you what you can do in the next 3 weeks. Help me, go to the Zoom call.
Yes.
Tell your friends about it. Just participate. Participation in hopeful solutions. After that, there will be the next thing. There might be the mayor, I don't know, when Cheryl talked about the mayoral election. See what's going to, I think a lot's going to happen in the next few months. You know? So, it's never, you know, leadership in the 21st century, like I said, it's not top down. It's holding the space for the brilliance of others. I'm not serving you, and you're not serving you to think we have to wait to see what Marianne says we should do. You know, it's not, that's old paradigm thinking. It's that We just need, it shifts inside ourselves. We have to get away from this obsession with our own pathologies. You know, I mean, listen, I've written those books. We took it too far. Right? Enough with what trauma are you dealing with today? What wound, are you okay? We've got to stop with, are you okay? We should go with, what great thing are you doing today? How can I help? That's where we have to be. You know, you think of people who walk across the bridge at Selma, he's playing, do you realize Stanley Jordan is like in the musical soundtrack on what we're doing right now? So cool. You know, I forget what I was going to say. But there was something there about, it said, the people who walked across the bridge at Selma, you think they were traumatized? You think the women suffragists who were put in prison were anxious? You know, one of my favorite things about learning history, one of my favorite things about history is reading, my favorite historian is Doris Kearns Goodwin. And her book, No Ordinary Time, was so amazing about Eleanor Franklin. She reads, she's such a storyteller. It's such a great book, because it was so similar to this time in many ways. But the story that I'm talking about here, I did not read her, but I've read it several times because it's kind of a pretty famous story about Lincoln, because his secretary took very good notes. And Lincoln, when they would come in, you know, they thought the Civil War was going to be 6 weeks. It was 4 years and 600,000 people died. We had 250,000 of our people who died in World War II. When they would come in and they would tell him how many people that died in the battle, he would regularly respond by putting his head in his hands, rocking back and forth. I cannot bear it. I cannot bear it. So, to me, reading history is so helpful. These were actual people. They weren't any different than us. I mean, he was a total genius, of course, but that, you know, in terms of what they were going through as people, they weren't enlightened masters. And I think we're ready for this moment. How do I know? It's happening. And one other thing, I know a woman who is a documentary filmmaker. She was born in Lebanon and raised in Norway. And she's a very, very successful documentarian. And she does like really high level, like women in the Congo, you know, the most serious type things. And she attends regularly some of the most powerful groups of, you know, world leaders who know her, etc. And she told me something that I want to pass on to you because I think it's really amazing. She was at a group of, you know, world leaders. And she was asking a question of some, I guess they were all leaders of democracies, but they weren't people who, all of whom were so thrilled with the United States. Okay? And the question that she asked them was this: what really scares you? What really keeps you up at night? What really makes you like shiver? Like, you're up in the middle of the night, like, what do we do? And she thought maybe the answer would be AI, climate change, nuclear war. She said she was so shocked by the answer that she got in almost every case, and the answer was this: what will we do if America goes down? That's how much responsibility lies in our hands. That's how serious this is. Yes, ma'am.
Well, first, just thank you so much for kindling in me and somebody the sanctity of this container that we hold as the United States. It's flawed, it's, you know, in need of repair, it's in a bad state, but something really good here. And I don't want to throw that out with the bathwater and speak to that so well. And I hate almost going back to the horse race after your comments, but can you just remind all of us in the room here, in addition to Maryland, where else you are on the ballot? Because, you know, I know CNN and MSNBC certainly are telling that.
I'm confused by what you just said. What else is on the ballot?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. So we know you're on the ballot here in Maryland,
In
the
here.
primary. However, there are additional primary states that
Okay,
are remaining.
DC, which is June 4th. I'm going to Louisville, Kentucky. That will be my final talk on the campaign this Wednesday. Idaho, Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. I think that's it. No, what'd you say? Oh, South Dakota? And I know Idaho. And also, I just want to say this because there are very legal things involved here. I hope you all got on Marianne 2024 tonight. Right? Okay. If you're on, are you all on Marianne? Okay. Once this is over, I will not legally have the right to contact you on Marianne2024.com. So I hope if you are interested in anything I'm doing after or whatever, that you will go to my Substack. It's free. You don't have to pay to get on. But if you go to mariannewilliamson.substack.com, then I will be able to, because like I said, once this is over, I won't legally be able to contact you. So thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hey, so you have a very creative way of speaking. Political analogies that you do are really interesting. Like, where does that come from? Like,
You know what, sir? I can't hear you.
Oh.
Say it without the mic.
yeah, sure, sorry. No, okay, so you have a very creative, like, way of speaking about politics, and the analogies you use are super, like, unique compared to other politicians, and I think it's really cool. Like, I think your style of leadership, your style of speaking is, like, something else, and, like, how are you so good at that?
How old are you?
24.
You're 24, I'm 71, and a whole lot longer to practice. Yeah.
Hi, Marianne. So I just want to address what this gentleman over here asked about hope.
Yes.
And piggyback on it. So at one point, I was in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I was passing out. It was in advance of the primary up there, and I was walking around, and I was passing out, I don't know, information, it was palm cards to people. And this one lady, she says to me, I have no hope. And I said, you know what? Marianne Williamson gives me hope. And I felt this way all the way back to 2020, the first campaign. So I say that because one of the ways that, you know, I just want to encourage you to join this campaign. Come to do the Zoom call, spread the word, get involved.
Yeah, you
because
can
that's
wear
what
a,
happens
I
when
hope
we
you'll
get
take,
hope.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's how the hope is instilled.
Yeah,
So,
no, on board.
here you go, Marianne.
So we got so much merchandise. Take a button, wear your button. You know, it's true. People are going to say, what's that? Take a bumper sticker for your car. Take this for your window. I mean it very seriously, guys. These are the kinds of things you wear the button. Somebody says, who is that? Oh, wait to hear her. Oh, isn't she the kooky lady? Well, really, they've done a real number. Oh, no, we all have to support Biden. Well, excuse me, did you attend the 7th grade or not? This is a primary. You know what I'm saying? If you want to be an ambassador for campaigns. So I hope you seriously will take that. And if you feel like it, take that donation button. I didn't need your financial support to come to Baltimore because I live in D.C., but the financial support to fly to Louisville, to stay in a hotel in Louisville. The people who are still on the skeletal, what it needs to keep the website up, etc.
Volunteers
Add
making phone calls.
if you can.
Volunteers making phone calls. There's so many opportunities.
Well, that's what that Zoom call on Wednesday night will be about. I think it's at 7 o'clock at night, right?
Yep. May I just add one other fun thing that I've done for your campaign?
What'd you say, Deborah?
May I add one other fun thing that
Okay.
I've done with your campaign? So there are these palm cards over here, and they have information. They have information about Mary Ann's campaign. And so I have this little challenge, and I tell people, I'm in this challenge to pass out 5 of these cards a day. Can I give you this?
That's really amazing, actually.
So anyway, that's what I do. I buy the day. So.
Great, absolutely. I hope you will. Yes, and I hope seriously. I hope you make a serious visit over to the table. Take the thing to your car, all of that. I don't think we have any T-shirts here, but yes, one more. And then I don't want to keep you nice people longer than
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Baltimore. We're happy to have you, of course. I just want to reflect briefly on your saying that leadership is holding the space for the brains of others. I feel just a testimony to that. You've done that in my life. So much has opened up my life, my creative endeavors, my political activism because of you. And as the gentleman over there said, we are your force multiplier. We hold space for your brilliance, of course, and we go out and spread the good word and bring our neighbors into this community that we're building and continue to go forward with, of course. But my question is just to reflect briefly on our loving quality and our wisdom. My hunch is that perhaps we need more loving, but I think there is an important balance with wisdom. And so as we reach out to our friends and neighbors, and whether they be Biden voters or Trump voters, how do you perhaps think that we can be more loving, but also wise and arrive at the moment when it comes to putting a stop to certain things that do need to be put a stop to?
But, you know, it's hard for me to hear you all. Did you actually ask a question there?
Yeah, just to balance love and wisdom with
Okay,
our
well,
neighbors.
sometimes there's no balance between love and wisdom. Wisdom is an aspect of love. And I will say this, sometimes love says no. You know, moral outrage is not born of anger. Moral outrage is born of love. You know, anybody who's ever had a teenager, anybody ever had a teenager or have a teenager? So there's something happens. You know, this 14 to 18, usually sex and drugs involved, where something happens and this fierce thing comes up, that will not happen in this house. Do you understand me? You're actually laughing behind because you actually don't know what they would do if they challenge you in that moment, but you're so fierce they're not going to. That's how we have to get about this country. That will not be happening here. That is love. There will not be hungry children. There will not be. Can you imagine every woman in the United States? If every woman in the United States alone really got it, there will not be 12,000 children starving on this planet. It's unacceptable. If we, American people alone, we never say it to our congresspeople. Why are there 12,000? We have 1 billion people who live on this planet on less than $1 a day. There's no dirt for food. Is the problem that people are starving or that we tolerate it? Because we've been convinced we just farm out our best thing. And, you know, then you look at something like, well, look what they did to her. Well, you know what? They wouldn't have been able to if more people would show up and defend me. So let me just leave you with this. And I was wondering if I should unsuspend. I talked to a minister in Detroit, Michigan, and he said, well, I'll quote Muhammad Ali. If the mission is right, the odds don't matter. And I think we're at a point where we've all been trained by our system to only do something if it looks like we can succeed. I don't think so. You do something if it's the right thing to do. And I know for myself, I said to someone the other day, I said, yeah, it's been brutal, but I got the respect of the one person I needed to get respect from.